And I think we are recording. Welcome everybody to another Milden webinar from Talk to Action. Today's topic is We're Not Family, Building a Community of Care in the Workplace. To start us off, a reminder that Toby's mission is that the best place on earth to learn how to build inclusion into how your mission critical business or team runs. Um, and so we want to make sure that this is a positive space for you to learn, to grow, and to get some practical actions into building inclusion meaningfully within your organization. Now, today's topic is on how to build a community within your organizations. And it draws from a pet peeve of mine when businesses say, well, we're a family here. And I find that really annoying, mostly because it's not true. You're not a family. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. I mentioned this in my last webinar for Milden. And afterwards, several people felt that they too did not like the term "we are family," and really resonated with this idea of instead building a community. And Brooklyn did this lovely post on LinkedIn about it, and it got an overwhelmingly positive response. Loads and loads of people commenting, saying that they loved that perspective. They wanted to learn more. They wanted to tackle this issue. And so I thought, let's do it. Let's talk about how you build a community of care. Because the truth is, it's very different like having a family and building a community. A family is something that you land in, and it's something that you don't choose. And you can love your family, you can adore your family, you can get on with them really, really well, but you are also beholden to them. And assumedly, they love you. But a family shouldn't give you a performance review once a year. They shouldn't potentially kick you out of the family if you don't do well on that performance review. Your place in that family does not have to do with necessarily whether or not you contribute to the family. It's not actually an accurate description of how workplaces function and run. Potentially, something that's a little bit more accurate is a community. And I know a lot of organizations have shifted to calling each other a team. And teams are great. Teams can work together, they can collaborate together, but a community still looks after one another. And I think that's the shift there that we want to think about. A community is people who come together to support one another and look after one another. And there's a big difference between a community and, say, a neighborhood. You might not know your neighbors, right? Even though you live in the same area or space as them. But if you were to, show up when your one neighbor needs, some childcare, or you have your other neighbors coming over for dinner, once a month, now you're building a community. It's a bit different. It's a bit more intentional. And then we can take it one step further and we can think about building a community of care. Now, a community of care is a unified collective dedicated to showing up for one another, looking after each other, and working together towards systemic co-liberation. So what that means then is in a workplace, it's not just about all sharing a space together and coming together every once in a while. It means you have unity. It means that you are showing up. It means that you are taking care of one another, looking after each other as full human beings, and you are working towards a shared purpose for your mutually beneficial freedom and equality, which is how I would define co-liberation. It is this idea of collective and collaborative liberation from unfairness and inequality. Everyone benefits from it, and everyone looks after one another. How do we build that, though, in a workplace, in those fast-paced environments, in spaces where the bottom line really does matter, where the project needs to get managed or the clients need to be given top priority? How do you do it? I've got some steps for you, and I'm gonna try and keep them as simple as possible. So, step number one, really simple here, but a little bit more easier said than done, maybe. We need to humanize one another. We need to not see each other as just cogs in the machine and see each other as fully fledged human beings. And one of the best ways that you can do that is to hear one another's stories, to hear their experiences. I've been working alongside an incredible organization called Heard Storytelling. They specialize in true spoken storytelling and people sharing their authentic lived experiences. Something like that, where you create space for people to just share who they are, and you get to celebrate what people are personally interested in, what their dreams are, and what their value is beyond just what they achieve. Right? A lot of the times in workplaces, we will only recognize the employee of the month or give somebody a promotion or a raise, or at the very least celebrate someone once they've done something of value for the business. But how do we to humanize people, we need to value them even before then. We need to see them as, funny or interesting, or they've got these really cool hobbies or interests. And that's really fun and that's really exciting, and they're a fully fledged human being. Number one, humanize one another before they ever do anything for you. Number two, then, is we need to unlearn some of the things that get in the way of us humanizing one another. Some of the things that make those achievements the higher priority. We live in a culture um, of capitalism, and that fosters things like competition, individualism, sometimes exploitation. Um, there are myths like meritocracy, and this idea of who owns something is the one in charge. And if we're going to foster a community that takes care of one another, we can't be fighting one another. We can't see each other as competitors. And we need to try and dismantle this idea of a hierarchy. And so we need to start seeing each other as equals. We're going to create equality. We need to see each other as equals. And so there's some things to unlearn from our culture that are getting in our way. And so sometimes organizations will do this with inclusion training or unconscious bias training. But I want to encourage you to take that just that next step further, to think about that large scale systemic piece and how it's shaping culture, not just within your workplace, but within all of the UK and even the Western world, and where there are opportunities to push back against those and create something that's a little bit more fair and kind and caring. Once you've done that, we go into step three. This is the envisioning stage. A lot of businesses and organizations have their business vision, right? Their vision for, the best case scenario for where their business might end up one day. You're going to be the best supplier of X product. You're going to be the best, or you're going to solve X problem for your clients or whatever it is. And I really want to encourage you all to have a vision for your inclusion strategy. What does the future look like? How is it more equal or fair? I've got for you here a GIF or a GIF, depending on your proclivities, of my ideal vision for the future. So this is from a video that you can find on YouTube. It's called Dear Alice. And it is a vision of the future where technology and nature work in harmony with one another. And it's an eco-friendly civilization, but it's also a future of community care and diversity and sort of people coming together and looking after one another. Um, and that's the vision of the future that I have. So then I need to think about, okay, well then, if that's where I want to be going, how am I going to get there? Right? What's my purpose? What's my drive? What's my identity as a person working towards that? Um, and who can I work collectively with in order to achieve it? So, and I know like right now times feel really dark, whether it's, climate change or cost of living crisis or, the rising tide of fascism or, genocide on a global front. It's a hard time. And sometimes if we're so focused on everything that's going wrong, then we won't be focused on where we want to be and how we're going to get there. So, step three, envision it and create a shared purpose for getting there. Then we need to figure out what we've got in order to get there. All right. So, this is a mapping exercise. You might do this as a workshop, a team building opportunity. Essentially, you want to figure out what assets you have to contribute towards creating that envisioned future. So what are the skills in your team, the resources that your organization has, the expertise that you've got on hand, and also the networks. So thinking about, okay, well, this is what we can do ourselves, but there are these big gaps that we can't do, but we know so and so and so and so might be able to do it. Let's bring them in as part of our network, right? So it's about mapping it out, strategizing, thinking carefully, and this step works really, really well to help your team identify how each individual member is also an asset. And so rather than seeing one another as competitors, like we talked about earlier, we start to see one another as assets. We're not all fighting for the same thing, promotion, who gets to be the new senior manager. We're not competing in that way. Instead, we're all collectively working towards this shared vision, and everybody has something that they're contributing to that, and everybody is a valuable member of that community. So got to map it out. Number five, once we know what everyone's contributing, we have to trust that they're going to, right? And building trust isn't something that you should just, I mean, like having trust isn't something you should automatically expect, right? It needs to be built in. That means that we have to create spaces where we listen to one another, where people are given that space to be heard. And then we identify one another's needs. For example, you might know that you have a colleague that has kids, but do you know if they actually struggle with accessing childcare or if their kids have any additional needs, whether they have any disabilities or learning development needs, so on and so forth? Is that getting in the way of their work? Is regular working hours difficult? Are there flexibilities that they might need? Right? These aren't necessarily accommodations for their own disability, but it might be things that they need as a parent or a carer. And there could be other things, right? Somebody might have something as simple or as small as maybe a new pet, right? And that might not seem like a big deal to you, but to them, they're potty training a puppy at home and life's stressful, and you know they might need some extra support and care in that space. Okay, well, how can you show up for them? How can you take care of them? Be honest. Be transparent about what you can and cannot offer, right? And so if you are able to say to them, you know what, you're totally able to come in late or leave early, not a problem. I can cover this. Let me take on this extra piece of work for you. I've got the capacity. Great. But if you don't have the capacity and then you offer to take it, and then their work falls behind because you didn't meet your promise, you've broken that trust. So be honest about what you can deliver and then fulfill those promises. Don't say you're going to do something and not do it. That also breaks the trust. So it's no good asking people for what their needs are if you're not going to try and meet those needs. And if you're unable to meet those needs, just be honest and try and have that open dialogue and conversation about what you can do and where you can go from there. After that, we're going to engage with those issues, right? We talked about envisioning that future, what it looks like. We know that there are things that are in the way right now that are not making that future the present, right? What are those issues, right? Sometimes that means talking to communities outside your own four walls. It means engaging with community groups, activist organizations, charities, grassroots organizers, but you want to make sure that it's aligning with that shared purpose that your community has agreed on. We want to tackle the climate. We want to tackle homelessness. We want to stop the rise of the far right, whatever it is, right? All right, well, what are the causes of those things? And what can you do to take responsibility for it? In my last webinar, which you can watch on Milden's YouTube channel, I talked about how we are all part of the same social system. And there are systemic inequalities that are not our fault, but being members of that system means that we either will uphold the status quo, which is oppressive and unfair, or we can try and do something about inequality. And if we're going to try and do something about it, we need to take responsibility for our community. And the best way to do that is collaboratively. So tackling these issues, both as a community and with your external communities, is a great way to engage with the issue, understand the causes of the issues, and develop an understanding of what to do about it. Then we're going to evaluate. So once you've started implementing a campaign or a program or a process for tackling systemic issues, and we did talk about how to do that in my last webinar, we need to constantly be evaluating, monitoring it. Is it working? Are you achieving steps 1 through 6 that I just shared with you? Are you meeting those goals, right? Is there anything you could have done better, right? Were there any gaps? If you're going to do it again, and I encourage you to keep going, this is not a tick box exercise. This is not a one time and then you're over kind of situation. Where can you improve? Where can you further develop? Where is there opportunity for growth, right? And there's also a step of, okay, we've been through this process and actually we figured out that we don't want this purpose. So we don't hold these values. We hold these ones. Do we need to reassess? Do we need to reevaluate? It's always important to reassess your values, reassess the direction you're going, and make sure it's still lining up with who you are and what you want, right? Don't get stuck in on it just because you said you would, right? Reassess, allow that space for that dialogue and that communication. And then your last step, celebrate. Oh my gosh, you've done something beautiful here. Whatever it is that you've achieved as a community has meant that you've, I would think, made a positive difference. You've shown up for your colleagues. You've shown up for your local communities. You've tackled a systemic issue. Perhaps you've alleviated some systemic barriers. Perhaps you've lowered your carbon footprint, or you've donated significantly to a local charity, or you've helped foster a workplace environment that is psychologically safe and genuinely fair. These are things to recognize, right? We need to identify and measure the impact that it's had, right? We need to celebrate the collaborations that have taken place, especially if it's cross-team or cross-organization collaborations. Those are not things to just be like, yeah, yeah, that was part of the work. No, that's the culture we want to foster. Celebrate it. What meaning have we pulled out of this, right? What has it meant to people? What is our understanding of the world? Like, how has it been shaped and changed? How has this been meaningful? And finally, where have we created abundance? Within our culture of competition and individualism, it creates a sense of scarcity. There's not enough to go around. And this feeling of scarcity, especially in the cost of living crisis, is what is driving so much hate and inequality right now. When we look at the rise of anti-immigrant sentiment, transphobia, and so on and so forth, communities being pitted against one another, it's because there's this feeling of scarcity and there's not enough to go around. And so people are fighting one another in order to get the scraps. In reality, there's more than enough to go around. We just need to think about how we're redistributing wealth and resources. And if we can create a feeling of abundance, we need to celebrate that, because that is at its core our key route for tackling division and hate. So there are your 8 steps for building a community of care. Going back to step number 1 then, right? This was all about how you can see one another as human beings. how you can hear one another. Storytelling, in my view, is the best way to do it. But there's loads of activities or initiatives that you or your team could put in place to drive a humanization of one another. So I'm going to reopen the chat. Um, are there any ideas that anyone has where, or anything you might have already done to help you humanize one another? Feel free to throw your answers into the chat. Let's see what people have to say. All right. We've got a question in here. How do people balance the challenge of accommodating everyone's needs? Who ends up doing the work? It's a really good question, Claire. While people are thinking about their answer to how can we humanize one another in the workplace, what are some activities? The answer to your question, Claire, is there is no one answer to that one. It is a challenge trying to accommodate everyone's needs. Sometimes you have to work as a team in order to find those accommodations. Sometimes it's somebody's specific job role. If you've got an EDI specialist, it might be their job role. Sometimes it means bringing in somebody external, like Toby or myself, to come in and support you with those things. It can be really innovative sometimes, but I'm afraid there's no cut and dry one answer. But my hope is that somebody isn't getting landed all of the work, especially if it's outside of their remit, and isn't being sort of taken for granted or overwhelmed with that. Right, let's see some of the, I hope that was helpful, Claire. I know it's not a really clear answer, but I hope it's a good starting place for you. Right, let's have a look at some of these ideas. So Philip has suggested just talk and spend time with people you don't normally chat to. I agree, Philip. Taking space to connect and chat, and sometimes it's great to facilitate that. So for example, I know one organization that I work with, they do a book club, and it's just an opportunity for people to come together and chat who might not normally chat, right? They're on different teams, and they get an opportunity to sit around and talk about a book, for example, and then they get to hear each other's views about that book, and then they get chatting some more. So yeah, but carving out that space, I think it's a good idea. Susan here has said going for meals out with colleagues, asking questions as icebreakers about food. I just find food a great topic that really opens up conversations around culture and backgrounds. Great. I love a good meal. You want to make sure that it is affordable and accessible for everybody, thinking about dietary requirements across both things like vegetarianism, veganism, gluten-free, but also different like religious traditions. So you want to make sure that you're careful with it, but 100%, it's such a great way to connect. And if you know that you've got members of your team from different ethnic cultures, ethnicities and cultures, try restaurants from those cultures, right? Like go to an Ethiopian restaurant or a Japanese restaurant or whatever else. Like that's a great opportunity to connect and learn from one another. So yeah, love that idea. We've got here another one from Philip. Heard a female footballer talk about her time at Chelsea FC, and their coach encouraged them to have lunch with someone different every day. Yeah, I think that's lovely, right? Just connect with one another. If your office has a lunch room or a breakout room, it's a great chance to sit somewhere else and get chatting with someone. Love that idea. Lucy says, start by having chats and listening properly. It always seems more overwhelming at first, and then things calm down for all. So you just maintain coffee chats, drinks after work, run club, walk club, etc. Love that. There's some informal ideas in there with the coffee chats, but there's also some more formal, structured things in there, like a club. And I think that's a great chance to really connect with your colleagues. And one of the fun things that you can do here is by actually actively listening to one another, you can find out what people are interested in. So you might find out that you have multiple colleagues who love hiking. Well, great. Let's drive on over to the Peak District or the Lake District or wherever else and go for a hike together. And now you're doing something that everybody enjoys, and it gives you something shared. So some great opportunities there. Serena says, we did a show and tell. I love that, where people brought something in that meant something to them and talked about it. We had lots of beautiful stories from childhood, coming out stories, family traditions, cultures. Yes, yes. Show and tell. Love that, Serena. Thank you for sharing. I'm a big fan of show and tell. Thank you so much for sharing that. Kim says, we have developed together agreed values and shared goals for all. Good. I love that. That's a really great part of the process. Thank you so much, Kim. Allison shares, any ideas for geographically dispersed teams and remote colleagues? It's a great question, Allison. If anyone has any suggestions, feel free to throw those in the chat. For me, I still think you can do these activities online. During lockdown, I did 3 different online book clubs, believe it or not. So there's ways of making it work. There's also opportunities, for example, um, I did one where people went for a walk, and so they had like Zoom or Teams, or whatever, on their phone, and then they went for a walk in their local area and said like, oh, I live in Manchester. This is what Manchester looks like. Or I live in London. This is a nice area of London, and just gives you a chance to get to know one another's worlds. Lots of opportunities. Speed networking, loads of fun. Yeah, and we do this a lot with external people, right? People we don't know. But what if you did a speed networking event for your own team, right? Did it internally, especially if you work in a large organization. If you've got over 100 members of staff, yeah, it's really likely that there are people who don't know one another at all. So a real great opportunity. Oh, Kim's got we do walk and talk meetings. Yes, love that. Really fun, really exciting. Great, we've got loads of ideas here. I'm gonna let people, oh, we've got book clubs, virtual quiz times on random topics. Love that, Martin, really great. Really fun. Loads of ideas in the chat. I'm gonna leave that for now. You all keep reading it. But what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna stop the recording. And I'm going to open up the floor for the Q&A. And that's going to allow for people to feel safe to ask their questions, knowing that it won't be recorded. So for anybody watching the recording, like I said, my name is Christopher Owen. I am the founder of Collaborate. You can find me at collaborate.co.uk. And otherwise, I'm an associate of Milden. Very proud to be working with Toby Milden and his team. And thank you so much for listening. Right, let's stop the recording.